Hello, welcome back to another video. This is the iPad Air, and I've been using it for the past couple of weeks, and I thought I might talk a bit about it today. Maybe share some of my thoughts, my experiences, and hopefully answer some of the questions you've been asking me about it along the way. And the reason I wanted to talk to you about the iPad Air was because when it was released for the first time, and I remember reading about it, I was very intrigued by some of the decisions that were made with it as a product. So I was very interested, but I was also a little bit skeptical at the same time. The thing that got my attention when I saw the iPad Air for the first time, or the design of it, was that looks exactly like an iPad Pro. In fact, take a look at this right now. This is the design of the iPad Air for the 2020 model. And this is the design of the iPad Pro 2018 11-inch model. As you can see, they're basically the same size. They look almost identical. And if I stack one on top of the other, they match up. Very interesting. And I remember thinking, whoa, that's big. So now with the Air, you've got the really cool home buttonless, sleek looking design of the iPad Pro. You've got the magnetically attaching pencil, which charges by itself, which is a huge feature, by the way. And there was a time when I had the old Apple Pencil, and I just kept losing it. So I actually didn't even use the pencil that much. So that's a big feature. And also, if you're a student and you're considering the potential that maybe one day down the line, you might get the Magic Keyboard, you have the option because the iPad Air is now compatible with the Magic Keyboard because it has the same design as the Pro, which I think is amazing. And I remember thinking, like, that's a great deal. You're basically getting an iPad Pro for less. Now, it's almost too good to be true. And I guess that's why I was skeptical at the same time. And I remember asking myself as I was sort of reading up on it, and saying, like, what's the catch here? Like, what's the sacrifices that have been made to make this a more affordable iPad? Every single time, like, there is a more affordable version of a product, there always is this one feature that the Pro model has that makes you want to upgrade from the affordable version to the Pro. And so I decided to do my research to find out, what sacrifices have actually been made to make this product more affordable for students. So essentially, what are the differences between the iPad Air and the iPad Pro 11-inch? And so I discovered 5 notable differences between the two. So starting with number 1, there are camera differences. And there's actually a few differences under this category. So firstly, if you go to the back of the iPad Air, you don't have the second camera or LiDAR sensor that's found in the iPad Pro. Now for me, I didn't see that as an issue. I only ever use the camera for scanning documents so I can annotate on them myself, and I'm happy with the stock standard 24mm camera that comes in the Air. LiDAR is great for things like augmented reality, but at the moment, it's not essential to what I do as a student. Also, when you look at the back camera, there is no flash on the Air. Once again, I don't mind. And also, you don't have portrait mode on the front-facing camera, which is honestly something I don't care about. In the past 3 years of using an iPad Pro, I don't think I've taken even one selfie with my iPad, purposely. Difference number 2, and this might be pretty big for some people, but there is no Face ID on the iPad Air. But, and this is a big but, you do get Touch ID. So now if you look at the top of the iPad, the power button is now a tad longer than before, and it also acts as a fingerprint scanner, which is quite clever actually. In fact, I know quite a lot of people who'd like to see that on other products as well. And it works really well. You just push it and rest your finger on the button, and it just works. Difference number 3, the bezels. Now, although the iPad Air is in the exact same form factor as the 2018 iPad Pro, it does have ever so slightly larger bezels than that model, which means it has an ever so slightly smaller display. So the 11-inch iPad had an 11-inch screen, as the name suggests, and the iPad Air has a 10.9-inch screen, which isn't much of a difference, but you do notice it. So that's something to keep in mind. I personally don't care because when you're using it as a tool, you just forget about it in the process. Difference number 4, storage options. So the iPad Pro comes in 4 different storage configurations: 128, 256, 512, and 1 terabyte. And the iPad Air only comes in 64 and 256. Now, I don't care about the 1 terabyte end of things that the iPad Air is missing out on, but it would have been great if the iPad Air came in 128 gigs. Because, I think 128 gigs is the perfect amount of storage for a student, because it gives them all the room they need to store all their files, but it also gives them the freedom to add maybe some videos and photos as well. That means if I was to get it, I'd probably be going with 256 gigs because these days 64 gigs is definitely not enough. Difference number 5, the final difference, which is also the biggest difference I noticed between both these models, is the refresh rate of the display. So the iPad Air does not have a 120 Hz ProMotion display. Now, what does that mean for those of you out there who don't know? Well, every single time you see movement on the iPad screen, so whether that's swiping on the home page, pinching in and out to zoom on something, browsing through the web, or most importantly, writing with the Apple Pencil, which is something that's integral to the iPad Pro experience, the screen is actually refreshing itself a certain number of times per second. So if you use an iPhone, for example, and you're swiping between apps on the home page, the screen refreshes itself 60 times every second. And that's the same for the iPad Air, 60 times per second. Now, the really cool thing about the iPad Pro, if you didn't know, is that it has the ability to refresh its screen up to 120 times per second. So that's double the refresh rate. And that's the thing that gives the iPad Pro its really smooth, buttery performance when you're swiping, pinching in, pinching out, and especially when writing with the Apple Pencil. And I guess that's the most important question when considering the iPad Air and the iPad Pro. It's, does the lack of that 120 Hz ProMotion display actually make a difference? Like, does it add any friction to that process of using the Apple Pencil? And does it make it a lesser tool? And so I've been testing it with that in mind over the past couple of weeks, and you'll be glad to hear that I was pleasantly surprised. Now, I have 2 things to say about this. Firstly, if you go straight from writing on an iPad Pro and then immediately start writing on the iPad Air, you can tell that there is a slight difference. And initially, I did find that slightly off-putting, and I was a little bit disappointed. However, moving to point number 2, when you actually start using this device by itself, like for half an hour, then an hour, then a day, and then a week, you completely forget about it. You're sort of immersed in the experience. And I guess it's that tiny bit of an adjustment that your mind needs to make to that ever so slight lag, which takes less than half an hour, by the way. And then you don't see it, and then you don't notice it anymore. You just use it as a tool. And I've used it for the past couple of weeks, and the experience is just as good as an iPad Pro 11-inch. The thing that excites me the most, and I guess it's more than just this product, but like if you consider the whole lineup of iPads, the really cool thing is we're starting to see a lot of the features that were exclusive to the iPad Pro for such a long period of time start to trickle down into the lower end models. Like there was a time where iPad Pros were the only devices that had the Apple Pencil. Like there was a time when the only way you could use the Magic Keyboard, that premium accessory, was if you bought up into the Pro line. And I think it's great that a lot of these features are now available to the iPad Air, because for students at least, now you have the option of getting the Magic Keyboard if you ever want it. You don't need to worry about missing out on it by not buying an iPad Pro. And so for me, that's the biggest positive that's coming out of this. Someone did ask me, are there any negatives about the iPad? And well, firstly, that's a big question. But I guess if you were to consider it as a tablet, it's pretty good. And there's nothing bad I can say about it as a tablet. It's only when you start comparing it to a computer where a whole lot of issues start arising. And I guess that whole section of analysis deserves its own video. So if you're interested in that, please let me know if you'd like a comparison between the iPad and a laptop. That is a big and great topic that I might discuss. But that is all for today. I have nothing else to say. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.